The galaxy burned, until a human dreadnought cast its shadow across the stars. Part 1. The alarm blared through the underground base as Admiral William Carter ran his hand through his gray hair. 20 years of war had aged him well beyond his 55 years. He looked at the holographic display showing the latest Varaki attack on the Mars colony. Another human settlement gone. Another million lives lost in a flash of alien weapons fire. "Turn it off," he ordered, and the room fell silent. The dozen officers around the war table stood still, waiting. They were the last high command of what remained of Earth's forces. Outside this bunker, 3 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, the surface world lay in ruins. "The Leviathan is ready, sir," said Commander Susan Hill. Her voice was steady, despite the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept in 3 days, not since the aliens had found and destroyed their last above-ground military base in Australia. Carter nodded and walked to the far wall where a separate hologram showed their last hope. The HSS Leviathan looked nothing like the warships humans had built before the Varaki came. It stretched over 3 kilometers long, its black hull absorbing rather than reflecting light. Unlike the smooth designs of previous ships, the Leviathan bristled with weapons and sensor arrays, giving it a predatory appearance. "Is the crew ready?" Carter asked. 973 personnel aboard, Susan replied. "Captain George Rivera reports all systems operational." "And the weapon?" Susan hesitated before answering. "The singularity cannon is installed. Dr. Frank Morris says it works in simulations, but he can't promise what will happen in real combat." Carter smiled without humor. "If it fails, we'll all be dead anyway." The Admiral turned to face the group. Each officer wore the same tired expression, the look of people who had watched their world burn for 2 decades. The Varaki Dominion, a coalition of 7 alien species united by their belief that humans were an evolutionary mistake, had appeared without warning. They didn't want Earth's resources or territory. They simply wanted humans gone from the galaxy. "The civilian evacuation ships?" Carter asked. Lieutenant Peter Walsh checked his tablet. "The last transports left Earth's orbit an hour ago. They're heading for the sanctuary worlds in the Tau Ceti system. Those ships carry 2 million people," Carter said quietly. 2 million out of the 9 billion we had before the war began. That's all that's left of free humanity." No one spoke. They all knew the numbers. Billions dead. Hundreds of colonies reduced to radioactive dust. The few million survivors were either on those ships or hiding in the ruins of once great cities, hoping the aliens wouldn't find them. "It's time we showed the Dominion that humans don't die quietly," Carter said. He touched the control panel and a new image appeared, a massive shipyard orbiting a blue star. "This is Helios Secundus. Once it was our largest colony in the Orion arm. Now it's where the Varaki build the ships they use to hunt us. There are at least 300 warships there," said Officer Allenday, studying the image, "and over 20,000 Varaki workers." "Yes," Carter agreed. "A significant portion of their military production. The Leviathan will strike there first." "Sir," Susan said carefully, "are we planning to warn the workers? Give them a chance? To surrender or evacuate?" Carter's expression hardened. "Did they warn the children on New Eden? Or the hospital ships at Proxima?" "No, Commander. This is no longer a war we can fight with rules. It's a war for survival." He walked around the table, looking each officer in the eye. "For 20 years we tried to communicate. We tried to understand why they hate us. We offered peace 7 times. Their only answer has been plasma fire and death. Now we'll speak to them in the only language they respect: power." Carter brought up a new display showing a complex series of symbols, the key to a hidden communication network developed by human resistance cells throughout Varaki-controlled space. After the Leviathan strikes, it will broadcast this signal. "Our people behind enemy lines will rise up. Sabotage teams will hit military targets across 50 systems, and the Ashari diplomats will receive our message." "The Ashari?" Allen asked. "They've stayed neutral this entire war." "Because they believe we're doomed," Carter said. "The Leviathan will show them, and every other watching species, that humans are not finished yet." He closed the displays, with a gesture. "The ship launches in 6 hours. Commander Hill, you'll join Captain Rivera as my direct representative." "Yes, sir," Susan said, straightening her uniform. Carter dismissed the group, but asked Susan to stay behind. When they were alone, he walked to a small safe embedded in the wall. He pressed his hand against it and the door slid open. From inside, he removed a small black box. "If the mission fails," he said, handing it to Susan. "If the Leviathan is captured, you must activate this." She took the box carefully. "What is it?" "Insurance," Carter said grimly. "The Leviathan contains technology we reverse engineered from crashed Viraki ships, but also innovations they've never seen before. If they capture the ship intact, they'll adapt and become even stronger. This will prevent that." Susan understood. A self-destruct system. "I hope we won't need it." "So do I," Carter said. "But hope hasn't kept humanity alive these past 20 years. Planning for the worst has." 6 hours later, Susan stood beside Captain Rivera on the bridge of the HSS Leviathan as the massive ship rose from its underwater dock. Through the view screens, she watched the ocean part above them, revealing a night sky filled with stars. "Course laid in for Helios Secundus," reported navigator Ben Lewis. "Stealth systems active." Rivera glanced at Susan, then gave the order. "Take us out, Mr. Lewis. Time to show the galaxy what happens when you corner humanity." The Leviathan lifted silently into the sky, its revolutionary engines leaving no heat signature or radiation trail. By the time it reached orbit, not even Earth's remaining sensors could detect it. The ship that would change the course of the war slipped into faster-than-light travel, vanishing from known space. Behind it, Earth waited in darkness, its cities in ruins but its spirit unbroken. The galaxy had burned humanity for 20 years. Now, humanity would burn back. The galaxy burned, until a human dreadnought cast its shadow across the stars. Part 2, the HSS. Leviathan moved through the darkness of space like a ghost. No radar could detect it. No sensor could find its heat signature. The massive human warship approached Helios Secundus after 3 days of faster-than-light travel. On the bridge, Captain George Rivera watched the main screen as the blue star came into view. Around it floated the largest shipyard the Viraki Dominion had built. Hundreds of alien warships in various stages of construction hung in space. Thousands of worker vessels moved between them like busy insects. "All stations report," Rivera ordered. "Engineering ready," said Chief Engineer Diane Powell. "Stealth systems working perfectly." "Weapons ready," reported Lieutenant Laura Wilson. "Singularity cannon charged to 80% and rising." "Life support and medical standing by," added Dr. Julie Rogers. Commander Susan Hill stood beside Rivera, watching the activity in the enemy shipyard. Not one of the alien vessels showed any sign that they detected the human dreadnought approaching. They have no idea we're here," she said quietly. Rivera nodded. "That's about to change." He pressed the comm button on his chair. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage the enemy. For 20 years they've hunted us across the stars. Today we start hunting back." Throughout the massive ship, nearly 1,000 crew members listened. Most had lost their homes to Viraki attacks. All had lost family. Now they prepared to strike the first real blow in humanity's fight for survival. "Take us in closer," Rivera ordered. "I want to be right in the middle of their shipyard when we reveal ourselves." Navigator Ben Lewis guided the enormous vessel, with careful precision. Despite its size, the Leviathan moved silently between half-built Viraki cruisers. They passed so close to one alien ship that Susan could see individual Viraki workers through the viewports. The aliens were tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern. Susan had never seen one alive before, only in intelligence reports. These were the beings who had declared humanity an abomination and set out to exterminate every human in the galaxy. "We're in position," Ben announced, "at the center of the shipyard." Rivera turned to Susan. "Commander Hill, as Admiral Carter's representative, would you like to give the order?" Susan hadn't expected this. She looked around the bridge at the faces watching her. Each person there represented what remained of humanity, determined, resourceful, and ready to fight back after years of running. "Deactivate stealth systems," she ordered. "Let them see us." Lieutenant Alan Day pressed several buttons on his console. Stealth systems offline. For the first time since entering the system, the HSS Leviathan became visible to Varaki sensors. Alarms immediately sounded throughout the alien shipyard. The worker vessels scattered in panic as the massive human warship suddenly appeared in their midst. "They're sending messages to their defense fleet," reported Communications Officer Jane Brooks. "They're calling for help." "Too late," Rivera said. "Target the primary construction platforms. Prepare the singularity cannon." On the tactical display, Susan watched as 20 Varaki defense ships turned toward them. The aliens were fast, but they were also confused by the sudden appearance of a human vessel larger than any they had encountered before. "Enemy ships are charging weapons," Alan reported. "Let them fire first," Rivera said calmly. "I want them to understand how useless their weapons are against us." The first Varaki shots hit the Leviathan's shields. Blue energy flashed around the hull, absorbing the alien weapons fire completely. "Shields holding at 98%, Alan reported. Rivera smiled. "Now, Ms. Wilson, show them what a human dreadnought can do." Laura's fingers danced across her weapons console. The Leviathan's conventional weapons came to life, firing precise shots that cut through 3 Varaki defense ships like they were made of paper. "Singularity cannon at full charge," Laura announced. "Target the main shipyard hub," Rivera ordered. "Fire when ready." Susan held her breath. The singularity cannon had never been used in actual combat. Dr. Frank Morris had warned them that the weapon created a temporary black hole, a dangerous thing even under controlled conditions. The front of the Leviathan opened like a flower, revealing a massive cannon barrel. Energy swirled at its tip, bending light around it. The stars behind it seemed to warp and stretch. "Firing," Laura said. A silent pulse left the ship. Where it traveled, space itself twisted. The pulse hit the center of the Varaki shipyard, a massive station where thousands of workers coordinated construction. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly at first, the station began to collapse inward. Metal twisted and broke. The surrounding ships were pulled toward the center point. A small black sphere had appeared where the pulse hit, and it was growing. "Gravitational distortion increasing," Alan reported, his voice tense. Just as predicted. Susan watched in awe as the artificial black hole consumed the center of the alien shipyard. Dozens of ships and thousands of workers vanished into its hungry maw. The defense vessels that had been firing on them were caught in the gravitational pull, unable to escape. Collapse sequence in 3, 2, 1. Laura counted down. The black hole suddenly compressed to a pinpoint of light, then exploded outward in a flash of energy. Where the center of the Varaki shipyard had been, there was now only debris floating in space. Silence fell over the Leviathan's bridge. No one had ever seen destruction on this scale before. "Get us out of here," Rivera finally ordered, "before their main fleet arrives." As the Leviathan turned away from the devastation it had caused, Susan watched the few remaining Varaki ships flee in the opposite direction. For the first time in 20 years, it was the aliens who were running from humans. "Send the coded signal to our resistance cells," she told Jane. "Let them know the first strike was successful." Jane nodded and began transmitting the message that would trigger attacks across Varaki space. Meanwhile, Ben calculated the jump to their next target. "Captain," Susan said quietly, "what we just did, we killed thousands of them." Rivera turned to her, his face grim. "Yes, just like they've been killing millions of us for 20 years. This is the language they chose when they started this war." Susan nodded, but something troubled her. "Will we be any better than them when this is over?" Rivera looked at the stars on the view screen as the Leviathan prepared to jump to faster than light speed. "That's why we're fighting, Commander. Not just to survive, but to make sure we remain human even after all they've done to us." the Leviathan, vanished into the darkness between stars, leaving behind destruction and a message that would soon spread across the galaxy. Humanity was fighting back. The galaxy burned until a human dreadnought cast its shadow across the stars. Part 3 news of the Helios Secundus destruction spread like wildfire across the Varaki Dominion. For the first time in 20 years, the aliens felt fear. Their leaders had told them humans were weak, that the war was nearly won. Now those same leaders struggled to explain how their largest shipyard had vanished. On the colony world of New Terra, once a human settlement, but now a Varaki mining operation, John Miller worked in the deep tunnels. Like the few thousand other human slaves, he wore a shock collar that kept him obedient. 6 years in captivity had left him thin and scarred, but his eyes still held defiance. "Something's happened," whispered Mary Evans, another slave working beside him. "The guards are nervous. They keep checking their communicators." John nodded slightly. He had noticed it too. The usual cruel confidence of their captors had been replaced by agitation. During the morning lineup, 3 Varaki overseers had been missing. "Maybe the resistance hit another target," he whispered back. The human resistance had been growing, stronger in recent months. Small acts of sabotage, stolen supplies, even a few guard killings. Nothing that truly threatened Varaki control, but enough to give the captive humans a flicker of hope. By midday, the change was impossible to ignore. Half the guards had been called away. The work quotas, usually strictly enforced, went unchecked. By evening, wild rumors spread through the slave barracks. An older man named Daniel Scott, who worked as a cleaner in the Varaki Command Center, brought the most incredible news. "They're saying a human warship destroyed the Helios shipyard," he told the gathered slaves in hushed tones. "Not just damaged it, completely destroyed it, thousands of Varaki dead." "That's impossible," said Mary. "They destroyed all our big ships years ago." "Not this one," Daniel insisted. "They're calling it a Dreadnought. The reports say it appeared out of nowhere, right in the middle of their shipyard. No sensors detected it until it was too late." John felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. "What else do they say about this ship?" "That it disappeared after the attack. They sent 50 warships to hunt it, but it vanished." The slaves talked late into the night. For the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a future where humans fought back, where the endless Varaki victories finally stopped. 3 days later, John was working in the eastern tunnels when all the lights suddenly went out. The emergency systems should have activated immediately, but they didn't. In the darkness, he heard the sound of his shock collar unlocking and falling to the ground. "What's happening?" Mary's voice came from nearby. Before John could answer, a new voice spoke from the darkness. "Resistance Team Echo, we're here to free you all." Light returned in the form of handheld beams carried by figures in mismatched armor. They moved efficiently, unlocking more collars and handing out weapons to the former slaves. "How did you disable the security?" John asked, accepting a plasma pistol from one of the rescuers. "We didn't," the resistance fighter replied. "Something knocked out all Varaki systems planet-wide about an hour ago. We've been waiting for a chance like this." As they emerged from the tunnels, John saw the night sky above New Terra filled with unusual light. The Varaki security ships that normally patrolled the atmosphere were falling, their engines dead. On the horizon, the main alien command center burned. "Look," Mary pointed upward. Against the stars, a massive shadow moved. Even from the ground, they could see it was enormous, far larger than any human ship John had ever seen before the war. Its dark hull absorbed the light from New Terra's 3 moons, making it look like a piece of the night had come alive. "The Dreadnought," John whispered. "It's real." As they watched, the massive ship transmitted a message to every working receiver on the planet. The voice was calm, confident, something John hadn't heard from a human military commander in decades. "This is Captain George Rivera of the HSS Leviathan to all human survivors on New Terra. The Varaki defenses have been neutralized. Evacuation. Ships are inbound to your location. The resistance will guide you to extraction points. Today you go home." Tears filled Mary's eyes. Home, she repeated. I never thought I'd hear that word again. Across the planet, similar scenes played out as 20,000 enslaved humans were freed. The Varaki guards, cut off from their command structure and faced with armed former slaves, either surrendered or fled. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Commander Susan Hill watched the operation unfold on the main screen. Smaller human ships hidden for years by the Resistance landed at designated points to collect the freed prisoners. Second liberation operation successful, she reported to Captain Rivera. Resistance teams report 97% survival rate among the captives. Rivera nodded with satisfaction. And the Varaki response? Still in chaos, replied Lieutenant Alan Day from the tactical station. Their nearest battle group is 9 hours away, and they're moving cautiously. They're afraid this is a trap. Good, Rivera said. Fear is a new experience for them. They should get used to it. Susan studied the captain's face. In the 2 weeks since they had left Earth, the Leviathan had struck 5 major Varaki targets. Each attack followed the same pattern: appear without warning, demonstrate overwhelming force, then vanish before the main Dominion fleet could respond. The Ashari delegation has responded to our message, announced Communications Officer Jane Brooks. They're willing to meet. This was what they had been waiting for. The Ashari were a powerful, technologically advanced species that had remained neutral during the human-Varaki War. If they could be persuaded to ally with humanity, or even just to stop their tacit support of the Dominion, it would change the balance of power. Set course for the meeting coordinates, Rivera ordered, and prepare the data package showing our recent operations. As the Leviathan prepared to jump to faster than light, Susan received a private message from Admiral Carter back on Earth. She excused herself to read it in her quarters. The message was brief. Phase 1 complete. The Dominion is in disarray. Their religious leaders are calling our ship the Shadow of Death. Resistance cells report increased recruitment and morale. The Ashari meeting is crucial. Convince them we can win this war. Carter out. Susan stared at the message for a long time. The plan was working even better than they had hoped. For 20 years, the Varaki had hunted humans across the stars. Now, for the first time, they were the ones being hunted. She thought of the freed slaves on New Terra, seeing the sky again after years in the mines. She thought of the billions already lost to Varaki aggression, and she thought of what awaited them if they failed. The Leviathan jumped into faster than light, vanishing from normal space as it had done so many times before. But this time, it left something new behind. The beginning of a legend that would spread throughout the galaxy. The humans had returned, and they cast a shadow that made even their enemies tremble. The galaxy burned, until a human dreadnought cast its shadow across the stars. Part 4. The meeting place was a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant. Its surface was barren and airless, with no resources worth fighting over. The perfect neutral ground, the HSS Leviathan remained in orbit, its massive form casting a shadow on the moon below. From its shuttle bay, a small diplomatic vessel departed carrying Commander Susan Hill, Communications Officer Jane Brooks, and First Emissary Ryan Adams. Remember, Adams told the others as their shuttle descended, the Ashari value directness, but also respect. They respond to strength, not threats. Susan nodded. Adams had been one of Earth's top diplomats before the war. When the evacuation began, Admiral Carter had specifically requested he join the Leviathan's crew for this mission. Do you think they'll help us? Jane asked. Adams adjusted his formal uniform. They've stayed neutral for 20 years while the Varaki slaughtered billions of humans. I don't think appealing to their conscience will work. Then what will? Susan pressed. Self-interest, Adams replied simply. We need to convince them the Dominion is losing and that helping us is their best option. Their shuttle landed on a flat plain beside a strange domed structure. It hadn't been there a day earlier. The Ashari had built it specifically for this meeting. The 3 humans donned lightweight spacesuits and exited their craft. The low gravity made walking awkward, but they had trained for this. They approached the dome's airlock and waited. The inner door opened, revealing the Ashari delegation. Susan had seen images of the aliens before, but never in person. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with slender bodies and 4 long arms. Their skin had an iridescent quality, shifting between blue and green in the light. Their faces featured 2 large golden eyes and a small mouth. 3 Ashari representatives stood in the center of the dome. Behind them, 6 guards watched the humans with visible suspicion. "I am Turak Val," the central figure said in perfect English. "High Elder of the Ashari Concordat. We have observed your vessel's capabilities with interest." Adams stepped forward and bowed slightly. "I am Ryan Adams, first emissary of Earth. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us." The formalities continued for several minutes, following protocols that Adams had memorized. Susan noted how the Ashari watched them, not with the hatred the Viraki showed, but with cautious curiosity. Finally, they moved to a round table in the center of the dome. The artificial gravity inside made movement easier. "For 20 years, we have watched your conflict with the Dominion," Turakval said. "We chose non-interference, while billions of humans died," Susan couldn't help adding. The Elder's golden eyes shifted to her. "Yes. The Viraki belief that your species represents an evolutionary mistake is not one we share, but their military power made opposition unwise." "That power balance has changed," Adams said smoothly. "As you've seen." He activated a small projector on the table. It displayed images of the Leviathan's recent attacks, the destroyed shipyard, liberated colonies, disabled Viraki fleets. "Impressive," the second Ashari admitted, "but temporary. The Dominion controls thousands of worlds. Your ship, while powerful, is just one vessel." "We're not asking you to join our war," Adams clarified, "though we would welcome such help. What we request is more specific." Susan placed a data crystal on the table. "Access to your communication network." The Ashari leaders looked at each other, their skin colors shifting slightly in what Susan guessed was their version of surprise. "That would be seen as direct support of humans," Turak Val said. "The Dominion would consider it an act of war." "The Dominion is already losing," Adams replied calmly. "They simply don't know it yet." He stood and walked around the table, his manner confident but not aggressive. "For thousands of years, your people have built and maintained the most extensive communication network in this galactic arm. It connects hundreds of species across thousands of light years." "This is known," the third Ashari said impatiently. "What may not be known," Adams continued, "is that human resistance cells have infiltrated every major Viraki world. They await only a signal, one that your network could deliver simultaneously." The Ashari leaders conferred quietly in their own language. Susan watched them carefully. She had spent the journey studying their body language. Their changing skin colors suggested intense debate. "The Viraki doctrine of racial purity has made many enemies," Adams reminded them. "How many other species have they declared evolutionary mistakes in their history? How many more will they target once humans are gone?" Turak Val's skin shifted to a deep blue. "You speak of the Nexari extinction. That was 3 centuries ago. And yet you remember it," Adams noted. "Just as you remember how the Dominion annexed the outer Ashari colonies 50 years ago, claiming territorial necessity." This clearly struck a nerve. The guards behind the leaders shifted their stance. "You are well informed," Turak Val admitted. "But our neutrality has protected our core worlds." "For how long?" Susan asked. "The Viraki see any advanced species as potential competition. Today it's humans. Tomorrow it could be the Ashari." Hours passed in careful negotiation. The Ashari requested breaks to consult with their government. Adams presented evidence of growing resistance to Viraki rule throughout the sector. Susan shared details of the Leviathan's capabilities that impressed even the technologically advanced Ashari. Finally, as the artificial day cycle in the dome began to dim, Turak Val made his decision. "We will grant limited access to our communication network," he said, "for one standard day only. What you do with that access is your concern. Afterward, we will claim our systems were temporarily compromised." "That is acceptable," Adams said, hiding his relief. "However," the Elder continued, Should your plan fail and the Dominion maintain power, the Ashari Concordat will deny any knowledge of this agreement. Of course, Adams nodded. And should our plan succeed, the new human government will remember who helped when it mattered most. They finalized the details quickly. The Ashari would provide access codes to their network relay stations. For 24 hours, human resistance cells across Varaki space would be able to coordinate as never before. As they prepared to leave, Turak Val approached Susan privately. "Commander," he said quietly, "I have studied your species. Humans have remarkable adaptability. We've needed it to survive," she replied. "Indeed, but tell me, if you do defeat the Dominion, what then? Will humans become the new oppressors?" Susan thought of the billions of dead, the ruined Earth, the refugees. She thought of Captain Rivera's words about remaining human despite everything. "We want justice," she said finally. "Not vengeance. There's a difference." The elder's skin shifted to a color she hadn't seen before, a soft violet. "I hope you remember that distinction when the time comes." Back on the Leviathan, Captain Rivera received their report with satisfaction. "One day will be enough," he said. "How soon? Can we access their network?" "The codes will be transmitted in 6 hours," Adams replied. "Then we'll have 24 hours to send our message to every resistance cell." Rivera nodded. "Good work. Set course for the Varaki home system. It's time for Phase 3. As the massive ship prepared to jump to faster than light, Susan went to the observation deck. She stared at the distant stars, thinking about Turak Val's question. When this was over, if they won, what kind of power would humans wield? Would they remember mercy after so much suffering? She didn't have an answer. But as the stars blurred around them, she made a silent promise to never forget what they were fighting for. Not just survival, but the right to remain human in a galaxy that had tried to burn them away. The galaxy burned, until a human dreadnought cast its shadow across the stars. Part 5, the HSS Leviathan appeared in the heart of the Varaki home system without warning. For the first time, there was no attempt at stealth. The massive human dreadnought hung in space like a dark promise directly above Varric Prime, the sacred homeworld of the Dominion. "All Varaki defense systems have detected us," reported Lieutenant Alan Day from the tactical station. "They're scrambling everything they have." Captain George Rivera nodded calmly. "Let them come. Are we broadcasting on all frequencies?" "Yes, sir," Jane Brooks confirmed. "Every communication device in this system is receiving our signal." Commander Susan Hill stood beside the captain, watching the main view screen. Varric Prime filled the display, a beautiful blue-green world, untouched by the war that had devastated human colonies for 20 years. Its orbital defense platforms were already turning their weapons toward the Leviathan. "First wave of defensive ships approaching," Allen warned. 50 vessels, heavy cruiser class. "Hold position," Rivera ordered. "Shields at maximum. Do not return fire unless I give the command." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but no one questioned the order. They had come too far to doubt their captain now. The first Varaki shot struck the Leviathan's shields, creating ripples of blue energy around the massive ship. More followed as additional defense platforms joined the attack. Shields holding at 90%. Engineer Diane Powell reported from her station. "We can maintain this level of defense for approximately 3 hours. Rivera turned to Susan. "Begin the transmission." Susan nodded to Jane, who activated the prepared message. On the main screen, Rivera's face replaced the image of Varric Prime. His message would now be playing on every screen across the Dominion capital and beyond, carried by the Ashari communication network to all corners of Varaki space. "I speak for what remains of humanity," Rivera began, his voice steady and clear. "For 20 years you have hunted us, burned our worlds, slaughtered our children. You believed us weak. You believed us alone." The tactical display showed more Varaki ships approaching, hundreds now, called from all parts of the system to defend their homeworld. "You were wrong," Rivera continued. "We are neither weak nor alone." At that precise moment, Susan received the confirmation signal she had been waiting for. Throughout Varaki space, human resistance cells activated simultaneously. On 37 critical Dominion worlds, carefully placed nuclear devices detonated inside military installations. Communication hubs went dark. Power stations failed. Ships in dry dock exploded. "It's working," Susan whispered. "All resistance cells report successful operations." Rivera nodded slightly before continuing his broadcast. "At this moment, your military infrastructure is being systematically destroyed by those you thought you had conquered. Your religious leaders told you humans were an evolutionary mistake. They were wrong. We are your reckoning." On the tactical display, Susan watched as a hidden human fleet emerged from the dark side of one of Varric Prime's moons. These ships were smaller than the Leviathan but numerous, vessels built in secret over years, crewed by survivors who had been preparing for this day. "Signal from Admiral Carter," Jane reported. "Operation Shadowfall is fully underway. All human ships report ready status." Susan felt a surge of pride. The plan had worked perfectly. The Varaki, so confident in their superiority, had never imagined that humans could coordinate a galaxy-wide counterattack. "The shadow we cast is larger than one ship," Rivera told the watching Dominion. "We could continue this war. We could burn your worlds as you burned ours." He paused, letting the implied threat hang in the silence. "Instead, we offer you what you never offered us, a choice. End this genocide. Recognize human sovereignty. Establish diplomatic relations and reparations for your crimes, or face extinction at the hands of those you failed to exterminate." The Varaki response came swiftly. A transmission from the High Temple of Evolutionary Purity, the religious center that had first declared humanity an abomination. "This is High Priest Maxis Krell," began the tall, gray-skinned alien whose image now filled the screen. "Your threats are meaningless. Your ship, while powerful, cannot stand against the might of the Dominion. Your resistance cells will be crushed. Your species will be—" The transmission cut off abruptly as one of the nuclear devices placed by human infiltrators detonated inside the High Temple itself. Susan watched without emotion as the massive structure collapsed on the planet below. "More Varaki ships approaching," Allen reported. "Their formation suggests they're preparing to use the Purifier weapon." The Purifier had been used to destroy Earth's moon in the early days of the war, a demonstration of Varaki power that had terrified humanity. "Activate the defense grid," Rivera ordered, "and prepare the singularity cannon." Susan moved to the weapons station beside Lieutenant Laura Wilson. "Target their flagship, but don't fire unless ordered." The massive Varaki fleet surrounded the Leviathan and the smaller human ships, their weapons charged and ready. For a long moment, the entire system seemed frozen in time. The hunters and the hunted, their positions finally reversed. Then, unexpectedly, a new transmission came through. Not from a military commander or religious leader, but from the Varaki Civilian Council, a political body that had been largely powerless during the war. "This is Council Leader Sarax Ven," said an elderly Varaki whose skin was paler than others of his kind. "We request a ceasefire to discuss your terms." Rivera looked at Susan, surprise evident in his eyes. She checked the intelligence files quickly. "Sarax Ven leads the moderate faction," she told him quietly. "They've opposed the genocide privately for years but lacked the power to stop it. With the military and religious leadership in chaos, they're seizing their chance," Rivera realized. He considered for a moment, then nodded to Jane. "Accept the transmission." For the next 6 hours, while the fleets maintained their standoff, Rivera and Sarax Ven negotiated. The terms were harsh but fair. Immediate cessation of hostilities against humans, withdrawal from all human colonies, reparations for war crimes, trial of those responsible for the genocide, and recognition of human sovereignty. Finally, as the artificial day cycle on the Leviathan came to an end, Rivera addressed his crew. "The Varaki Civilian Council has accepted our terms," he announced. "The war is over." A stunned silence fell over the bridge, followed by quiet tears and embraces. No one had truly believed they would live to see this day. Susan contacted Admiral Carter on Earth with the news. His response was brief but emotional. "Well done, Commander. Bring our people home." As the Leviathan prepared to return to Earth, Susan stood at the observation deck watching the stars. The galaxy had burned humanity for 20 years, but humans had refused to be consumed. Instead, they had cast their own shadow across the stars, not as conquerors or exterminators, but as survivors who remembered what it meant to be human, even in the darkest times. The war was over. The rebuilding would be long and difficult. But for the first time in 2 decades, humanity could look to the stars without fear.